DA in the state of Maine. She's been in the legislature. She served on appropriations. She's written budgets. She's been an incredibly effective attorney general. You know, the nice thing about Janet is when she picks a fight, she picks the right one and she wins. And, you know, in Augusta, she has been the foil. Aside, no, that's not true. The House Democrats are going to say, wait a minute, the House Democrats, right? Me in the Senate, I'm in the minority, but not for long. But I'll tell you what, in the executive branch, in that branch, the statewide office, it's been Janet Mills, time and time again, who has figured out which battle she can win, and then very methodically and very effectively, she wins. And she pushes back on LePage every time. And she doesn't do it frivolously, she doesn't do it for headlines, she does it to win. And that's one of the things I love and I admire most about Janet. And when she's governor, all those values that Dale and I talked about, the environment, our young people staying here and having good jobs, renewable energy, local energy production and local jobs, all of those things are going to be part of her agenda. And to be in the legislature with a person with that vision and that experience will just be an extraordinary, extraordinary privilege. So please join me in welcoming our next governor, Janet Mills.
Well, with two introductions like that, I think I should just sit down and be quiet. I can only lose ground. Thank you so much, my good friend Dale and Kathy. You do such a tremendous job. We're so lucky to have these people on the Health and Human Services Committee and the Appropriations Committee. You have some of the best representation in the entire state of Maine. The two most important committees where they get stuff done. And we know how to get stuff done, even in tough times. Let me tell you, I think you know that I grew up about 80 miles northwest of here, in a little town of Farmington. You go through it on the way to Sugarloaf or Saddleback. You just go right by my house. You breeze right by. You don't stop and buy anything. But, hey, that's what a small town is. But I live right in town, right near where I grew up. Spitting distance to 2 libraries, 3 bookstores, a movie theater with 8 movies a day, and a couple of good bars and restaurants, and Rennie's. So I've got the whole world at my feet. I got to know my town and my neighbors growing up there, delivering newspapers as a kid. And later on, serving meatloaf and mac and cheese at the local diner as a teenager. A couple things I learned that have stood me well during my life. One is, we don't put up with bullies. We just don't tolerate bullies. It's your friends, your neighbors, or even people you don't like. We don't let them be bullied. Secondly, we expect everybody to not just talk the talk, but to walk the walk. That's a principle of life in my town, in my state. And thirdly, we care about each other. We have compassion. And these are things I want to bring back to state government. Things that have been sorely lacking, but they are still a part of Maine values, so dear and near to my heart and yours as well. So I grew up, I left the state, went to school, dropped out, dropped back in, dropped back out, eventually got a degree, God knows how, in French. Squeaked it out and worked a couple more years and then came back to Maine to go to law school and been back ever since. When I got back to Maine, I was interested in women's issues. It kind of, got me involved in the Democratic Party. Actually, I grew up in a Republican family. No surprise there. It was Western Maine. Everybody was Republican. My family were Republicans. But they weren't Tea Party Republicans. No such thing existed then. They were Teddy Roosevelt kind of Republicans. We lived in the shadows of Margaret Chase Smith. She would visit my house and talk to me about politics and government and what a great world she felt she lived in. And they believed in conservation and individuals and justice and freedom. They believed in those things. Some Republicans in the Maine legislature were the first ones to put in consumer rights bills and protection of our natural resources. But when I got of age and it was time to register and enroll, I enrolled as a Democrat. Been a Democrat my entire life. As things progressed, all the women in my family became Democrats, and all the men stayed Republicans. But I want to tell you, my 3 lifelong Republican brothers, some of whom you know, have unenrolled as Republicans, and this year have enrolled as Democrats to help their sister become governor. And I meet Republicans on the street all the time who say they're quitting their party because they don't like what's happening. They don't see any choices there. And they're coming on board to help me become governor on November 6th. And I welcome them. And I welcome every independent of conscience to be on the team as well. Well, so when I came back to Maine, I was interested in women's issues, got involved in women's organizations, and we started going to legislature, and we started drafting legislation on domestic violence and sexual assault and displaced homemakers. Great stuff. We had great ideas. And we pumped them through the committees, and we got a good response, and then we turned our backs, went home, and they all died in the back room of the Appropriations Committee, that table thing. And we said, what the heck gives here? So 4 of us got together in my apartment then in Portland, and we said, we need to do something different. We need to start a new organization. Let's call it the Maine Women's Lobby. So 40 years ago, next month, we started the Maine Women's Lobby. And it is now the longest existing women's lobby organization in the country. And I'm so proud of everything they've done for Maine women and families over the years. Constant presence in the halls of the legislature, almost the conscience of the community sometimes in the halls of the legislature. So I'm proud of that because it's about getting stuff done. It really is. It's common sense. Then when I got to be district attorney for Androscoggin, Franklin, and Oxford counties, I had to stand up to a few bullies. First, I was the only woman in New England, and one of the only women on the whole board nationally, one of the few women in the country. And so I go to these national meetings, and to be 550 men in suits, and one of them inevitably turned to me and said, "Would you make me a cup of coffee, dear?" Really? Look, things have changed. They're changing. They really are. But you had to make change happen, and you do it by getting things done, right? And I put a few big bullies in jail during my time as district attorney, prosecuted some serious cases of child assault and domestic violence and the like. Made some enemies along the line, no question about it, but that's what you do. You get the job done. And then I went to the legislature, served in the Appropriations Committee for 4 years, 4 of the toughest years in Maine's economic history. And we got 7 budgets, 7 consensus budgets done in 4 years. And we worked across the aisle with people like Carl Turner, Solomon Millett, people you heard about. It was during the recession of 2008, 2009, but we kept the basic social services safety net intact and basic education funding intact, basic health care intact. We kept the drugs for the elderly program intact. So I know how to get things done. When I got to be Attorney General, I stood up to one of the biggest bullies the state of Maine has ever seen, in my view, many people's view, the person of Paul R. LePage. The first thing he wanted me to do is help him take thousands of Maine youngsters off of health care. He said, I want to get rid of them. They're able-bodied. I'm going, well, able-bodied people get into accidents. Able-bodied people break their arms and get the flu and, come down with illnesses you can't prevent. And I sent him a memo saying, here's legally why you can't do that. He didn't like my answer. He went to federal court, and I intervened against him, and we won all the way up to the Supreme Court, which denied cert, of course, and we kept thousands of Maine kids on health care in Maine. Because it's about getting things done even when you have an opponent, a person who opposes you as vigorously as Mr. LePage has opposed all of us. There were many other things he's tried to do, but I'm not running against him. And what galled me as well on health care, Medicaid expansion, we all want that. It's basic sense, humanitarian, economic sense. But 5 times he vetoed a bill that would have allowed Narcan to be dispensed over the counter like 30-something other states have done without controversy or question. And every time he vetoed those bills, he made national news saying, Narcan doesn't save lives, it just postpones death. And I thought, as a Maine native, for the chief executive of my state to make such a callous statement about human life, I just couldn't believe it. So, I'm always suing the pharmaceutical companies for price gouging and off-label marketing, all these kinds of things. I had some money. I drew down some money out of the settlements from pharmaceutical companies. Not tax dollars, pharmaceutical company money, same pharmaceutical companies that created the opioid crisis. And I bought a room full of Narcan and have some in my car. Probably expired by now. But as your chief law enforcement officer, I have a badge. If they don't give me a gun, you're safe. But I'm allowed to give that out free to any police department that wants it. So we've quietly gotten it out there all across the state. I've given it out to 85 police departments. And as of last weekend, we've saved 524 lives just with that Narcan. Because it's about getting stuff done. You know it and I know it. And when we talk about vocational education, I believe in it. Mr. Moody believes in it. He talks about it a lot today. I started out in Bar Harbor talking to the Maine Medical Association. Sean Moody didn't show up. God forbid we should talk about health care. And then I went to the United Bikers toy run in Windsor. That was a different crowd. Sean was there, and he got up and took the mic, and he talked about how all the teenagers should be working. We should bring down the labor laws and let teenagers work. I'm like, what is he talking about? Holy cow, Charlie, okay, that's good. We'll deal with that when he shows up at the next debate, when we can talk about it. But he talks about vocational education. I think we all believe in voc education. The CTEs, we have 27 of them, I think, and some of them are really, really good. Some of them need improvement. But I put my money where my mouth is. It's not just talking the talk. So a couple of years ago, I had to sue a company named Bath Fitter. You know them? They renovate your bathrooms. You probably used them. It's okay, they do a good job. But they weren't using licensed plumbers, just so you know. Check those joints and valves. Any leaks? But they weren't using licensed plumbers, so I had to take them to court. And I said, you got to cut that out. Got them to the table. They signed a consent judgment saying we'll use licensed plumbers from now on. And we got a $500,000 forfeiture from them. And I said, what am I going to do with this money? So the manuals needed updated. We paid for updated manuals, plumbing manuals for people. And then I called around to the VOTEC people I know. I go, you got a plumbing program? I started a plumbing program at Biddeford High School, Lewiston High School, Regional Tech, Oxford Hills, and Foster Tech in Farmington with 10 towns in it, 12 towns in it. And those plumbing programs have been going on for 2 years now. They've trained more than 100 students in plumbing, the art of plumbing. And I said, get some girls in those programs. Why not? It's time. Let's see more girls and women in the trades, and there's money there, folks. And a year ago, the student of the year at Foster Tech in Farmington was this young woman, Lexi Daggett from New Vineyard, who was in the plumbing program at Foster Tech. She's a great kid. So it's about doing what you can, getting stuff done. That's what I'm about. That's what I want to do as governor. Now, backing up for just a minute, because I could talk forever about Medicaid expansion, about workforce development, about renewable energy, and all the things we want to do as soon as January 3rd comes around. Day one, start us in a new direction. But let me just back up, because you see a new TV ad about me, and there's a young woman who's very pregnant in that ad, and there's a little girl who happens to be my granddaughter in that ad. I just want to tell you about them for a minute, if I may, because I've got the mic. I can talk. When I was a district attorney, I was the district attorney in Franklin, Oxford, and Androscoggin counties, living in Lewiston. I met and married my husband, Stan. He was not a politician or a lawyer. He became a tennis coach at the high school, great coach, very beloved. And he was a widower with 5 daughters when I met him. 5. You may rethink your support for me. Least rational thing a person ever did, probably. I was a career woman in my mid-30s, no kids, never married. I married a guy with 5 young girls, 5 kids, whose mother had died very suddenly of cancer. And took on a big project there. Look, if I can get through that, I can probably run state government, right? But they're great kids. They're all grown up now. They're not kids anymore. But when they were kids, I thought, well, how am I going to develop a relationship with all these girls? You know, they probably gang up on me every night, but let's try to broker a relationship. So I bought a bunch of Barbie dolls. I built a Barbie doll condo in the hall of the house. I wallpapered it. I carpeted it. It was beautiful. We had the Corvettes in the hall and the Ken dolls with their heads cut off. That happens. They're loose. And the Barbie doll had a wardrobe that was 10 times greater than stepmom's. I used to say they had their mother's good looks, their father's hair, and their stepmother's clothes. But so I came home from the courthouse one night, getting ready to make dinner, and the little one was in the hall. She was about 5 years old. She was putting this Oscar de la Renta dress on the Barbie. And I lean over and I said, oh, Lisa, Barbie's getting all dressed up. Where's she going tonight? She looked up without a hitch. She said, well, Barbie had grand jury today. And then she goes, and tonight she's got to go to a Democratic fundraiser. Bottom well. That's the little girl in the ad who's having her second child, second little girl, a month from now, in October. So really proud of those kids. And, you know, we're very close, and they're good friends. And we love each other very much. And I would never have learned as much about love, relationships, and compassion as I have with them, from them. And now 4 grandchildren here in the state of Maine, and 1 on the way. And so it's for them I'm working for this job too, and planning to be the next governor of Maine, because they deserve a future here in Maine. And all of your kids and grandkids do too. Good paying jobs with a future, with broadband, with cell phone coverage, with infrastructure that compensates us, that provides opportunities for business and micro businesses and entrepreneurs. That's the kind of thing we need. 2 of my grandsons were in the car with me. They're in high school now. A couple of weeks ago, and well, I was driving. One of them dropped a call on his cell phone. He got mad. He said, darn it, Granny, this is why we're leaving the state of Maine. I said, Wyatt, you dropped 1 call with your girlfriend. Don't abandon us. Stick with me, kid. But isn't it ridiculous? You can't drive from the state's largest city to the state's capital or back without dropping a call at mile 47. Doesn't that tick you off? I want to stand out there with an antenna. I go, well, fix this problem now. How can our state be so backwards? Well, but the kids and I, girl, no longer kids, we're very close. And 4 years ago, my husband passed away. He'd had a stroke, and he was in and out of facilities and institutions and home health care for about a year before he died. And it was a tough year. I was Attorney General, had a full-time gig there. I was trying to run for re-election, and you know, it was a tough job. Being an advocate, trying to find him the best care, trying to argue with the insurance companies all the time. And I thought, well, this is pretty tough on us and on the kids, but it's no different from what thousands of Maine families go through every week, every year in the state of Maine, all across our state. If you're lucky enough to have insurance, you're dealing with high co-pays and high deductibles and the ridiculous cost of prescription drugs. And denials of care, denials, because that's what the insurance companies are trained to do. You know that. But I also got to know an awful lot of good people that year. And people, some of the older people from my community, people that I delivered newspapers to as a kid, people whose own kids and grandkids have long left the state of Maine for greener pastures somewhere else, and they don't have anybody looking after them here in Maine. Because those kids and grandkids can't stay, can't come back. And I think about them every day. as I head out on the campaign trail, head back to the office. And I think about the wonderful healthcare workers I encountered and dealt with constantly. People working very hard to take care of folks like my Stan. People working for pretty low wages, LPNs, RNs, CNAs, and trying to put food on their table, make a car payment, make a mortgage payment, maybe even put a kid through college. And I think about them every day when I get up and go to Augusta to try to protect the civil and constitutional rights of Maine people and get back on the campaign trail and get this job done. Because we've got to work for them too. The healthcare industry is the largest labor sector in the state of Maine, 110,000 people working in healthcare. It's an enormous driver and enormous cost in the state of Maine. When we talk about healthcare reform, we've got to look at all aspects of healthcare reform. When it comes to Medicaid expansion, we will do that on day one because the people voted for it. And the money is there. You put the money on a platter and put it in front of the governor, and he looks the other way and says, the money's not here, the money's not here. You put the money in front of, the money's not here, the money's not here. I go to bat against two of the largest international tobacco companies, R.J. Reynolds and Philip Morris. I get $35 million pumped into the Fund for Healthy Maine directly into the Medicaid account. He goes, the money's not there, the money's not there. Stop it. The people have voted. The hospitals want it, the providers want it, the people want it. The Chamber of Commerce wants it. Because they did a survey of 1,000 businesses, all of whom said the biggest challenge to them in staying in Maine is the high cost of health insurance and health care. 1,000 businesses. So the Chamber of Commerce is saying, look, this is good for business. Our businesses in Maine cannot compete with the businesses in 35 other states where they've expanded Maine Care, Medicaid, because they don't have the high cost of insurance. Why? Not only does the Medicaid expansion provide vital health care to 70 to 80,000 people who don't have insurance now, and 6,000 to 7,000 jobs, and saving a dozen or so rural hospitals that are on the brink of failure with negative margins. But it also reduces that cost shift onto the insured and the private payers and self-payers. $570 million in 2016 alone was shifted from the hospitals and providers onto the rest of the communities with health insurance because they got to pay, they got to send it somewhere. So that cost shift will be reduced when we do Medicaid expansion. It's good for business, it's good for people, it's good for common sense. So we're going to do that. So, I don't believe it. I know you have questions. I don't need to go on another hour. I could, but any one of these topics. But, I care very deeply about this state. People say, why are you running for governor? Well, I could give you the simple answer. Well, I'm doing it for my kids, for my grandkids. I want them to have a place to come back to. I could say, well, I love this state, it's a place I love, and blah, 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 blah. You've heard that 1,000 times. I keep thinking of Mary Oliver, the poet, and what she asked. She said to every one of us, what is it you wish to do with this one wild and precious life of yours? Do something good. I think this is the time, this is the place, this is the time, this is the way I can do something good for the state of Maine. We see what's happening in Washington. We've seen the Kavanaugh hearings this week. We know the stakes could not be higher. We know, regardless of Kavanaugh, the Supreme Court is not going in a good direction. So much at stake. Women's right to choose, reproductive rights, health care, voting rights, the right to engage in collective bargaining, the right to preserve our natural resources with appropriate and reasonable regulation. All those things are at stake, and the Supreme Court's not going in our direction. So all those things are going to be laid at the feet of the state governors, and I want to be the governor who protects every one of those rights. I will stand there and protect those rights for all of you and all the people of the state of Maine. I know we can put one foot in front of the other and get the job done. I see a new direction for our state. I see a state that is undivided, a state where we do have good paying jobs for young people here at home in tech and solar and all kinds of new new industries. I see a state where we have our own renewable energy generated here in Maine, where we have broadband to all of our communities, where every senior has heat in their home and every veteran has a home to go to, and small businesses are cherished because they're the backbone of our communities. I'm running for governor because the best chapter in our state's history has yet to be written, and I want to write it with all of you. I'm happy to take any questions.
That statistic that Dale read was alarming, about 100 new jobs in 10 years. And I'm wondering, every day you meet someone that's moved to Maine, and we moved to Maine 21 years ago, and we didn't move for work, and so I always... we moved to Maine? So I asked...
Stick with us,
So I asked people, I know why you moved to Maine. You want to raise your kids here. It's a great place, the natural resources and everything. But I said, did you come here? Did you have a job? And they said, oh, no, I telecommute.
Oh, no, it was a public
So
event,
everybody's
'cause we're at a public space.
telecommuting
and did you
and
sign
moving
in?
Yes.
here.
Yep.
And I know they have to pay taxes and everything, but how
Adriana.
do you combat that?
Adriana.
Because they can't get
Yeah.
jobs here.
Pleased to meet you.
But they're moving here. I don't know. I just...
Oh, I'm a
Well,
poli
the
sci
statistic Dale talked about was from the Maine Department of Labor's own job growth prospects, job growth estimates, which show basically zero job growth in the next 8 years. And that's alarming. So what are we doing? We're
No,
shutting
I
the
don't
door.
work for the Moody campaign.
We gotta stop shutting the door, put
Yeah.
put the welcome mat
Have a
out
good one.
for people from all over who have not only their own opportunities at stake, but who have things to offer us. People with credentials from other countries, other states. We've got to make sure that they're welcome here and stay here, that they get licensed here appropriately, that they contribute to the workforce here. It's for their sake and our sake, both. Broadband is not available everywhere, and there are many communities that have good internet but not good enough to actually telecommute or to start a business or to do telehealth, teleeducation, things that are so important to every community, not just our rural communities. The two challenges of broadband in Maine: we have the most dispersed population in the country, most dispersed. And we have those funky peninsulas, where we go to the beaches and climb rocks and stuff. And there's not a lot of profit for a private entity to run fiber way down to the end of these peninsulas. And so we've got to address that on state. We don't have a statewide broadband strategy, and I want to do that. There are people looking at different ways to do broadband in different communities. Let's do it together with some bonding capacity, with some innovative ideas, combination of fiber to some regional hubs, and Wi-Fi, cable, etc. to the home, the last mile. We can do this together. And that'll allow people to create jobs in the communities that need them, and telecommute, maybe within Maine, maybe without Maine, maybe to Alaska, maybe to Finland, who knows. But I have friends who practice tax law on Deer Isle. He grew up here, they moved back here to raise their kids on Deer Isle. Beautiful place. But there's just not enough. Not adequate broadband. They've tried satellite, cable, Wi-Fi, all these things. I said, well, how do you transmit your files back to the clients whose post office boxes are in Delaware? Well, he goes, if it's an important file, we'll drive up to Blue Hill and sit outside the Dunkin' Donuts and press send. Really? I mean, this is the 21st century. Come on. If it was a real important file, we'll FedEx it. If we don't trust FedEx, we'll just fly it down ourselves. Not a good way to do business. Not a business-friendly environment. So, yes, sir.
One of the statistics Dale didn't mention that I think is profoundly important. Maine now ranks 7th in the United States, at the bottom, in terms of food security.
Yeah.
We look like a deep southern state. 1 of every 5 children in the state of Maine under 16 years of age lives in a food insecure household. Hungry kids don't learn. So even if you didn't care about the humanitarian aspect of it, that means 1/5 of the future workforce is not going to get well educated. We've left it basically to SNAP, which the Republicans keep on cutting back, more and more restrictions We depend upon Good Shepherd Food Bank and all of the pantries like we have here in Cumberland. Do you have any ideas about food insecurity? Here we are in a terribly important, I run the Maine food strategy, and we have a huge abundance of good young farmers, people wanting to get access to the land. We've got, some really terrific things happening. We get no leadership whatsoever from agriculture. It's a purely regulatory. They're fighting local food ordinances like crazy. Do you have any sense of what your administration might do in terms of food insecurity?
Good point. And I've heard this and read about this a lot, and it's very disturbing. And one thing we've got to do is talk about children's issues across the board, not simply in HHS or education or corrections, but reinvoke the Children's Cabinet. It's on the books for the last 20 years. Hasn't met in 8 years. So that not only commissioners but sub-department heads can sit and talk about the holistic needs of children. Agriculture, education, corrections, labor, all those things. People should be talking together instead of having silos and saying, well, this kid has a problem at Long Creek, they're not getting mental health treatment. This kid is in the court system. This kid is dying at home and not being well taken care of by the caregivers. Let's talk, and this kid is in CDS but not in the school system, etc. Let's talk about it all holistically. On food insecurity, it is a ridiculous problem. We have a low unemployment rate. We can be the breadbasket of New England. We have great farming opportunities and great farmers in this state. The food to table movement is a big one and one I support. And it can be food to table in the schools, as Craig Hickman has pushed for, food to table in the homes, food to table in the communities. We shouldn't have to rely on big jars of pennies and nickels at the corner store to make people healthy. But
we're the largest importer of food of any state in the country, which means it comes in on trucks.
Yep.
And that's our food system.
And yet we have the opportunity, we have the sunshine. If you've ever toured backyard tomatoes, it's 42 acres of tomatoes grown in greenhouses. And they tell me we could do this anywhere in the state of Maine. The same weather, same opportunities and climate and sunshine. And with solar power to keep things warm in the winter, cool in the summer, we can do these things with the right tax incentives, the right facilitation. We've got all these alphabet soup entities that are doing economic development and stuff. I'd like to see them talking a lot more together and providing that kind of incentive. We have a craft beer industry of about 120 breweries. I'd love to tour every one of them. I've only been a couple, but we could be growing the barley in Aroostook County. They do grow barley, but the quality isn't necessarily the right kind. And then the malt, we don't have enough processing of the malt. We could do all of that, sustainable brewing from farm to bottle here in Maine. Glass. Sorry. Farm to glass.
Mug.
No plastics. Yes, ma'am.
Could you tell us how many debates there are going to be and when they are going to be?
When are the debates? You guys know when the debates are?
One tomorrow. Lewiston, Auburn.
Oh, that's not really a debate. That's a forum. The forum in Lewiston tomorrow evening. I think all 4 people are supposed to be there. We had a forum this morning in Bar Harbor, Maine Medical Association. Mr. Moody didn't show up. Terry and Ellen did. 3 of us. There are going to be some televised debates. I think 7 or 8 of them, maybe. Quite a few, which Mr. Moody has committed to. But we'll see. We'll see. Yes.
I work a lot on gun safety,
Yes. Thank you.
and in the last election, background checks did not pass.
Right.
And although the statistics said that the majority of Mainers really wanted background checks. So what are your thoughts about that?
I think the polls were wrong on that bill. I mean, honestly, 13 out of 16 counties defeated the background check, voted against the background check referendum. Now, maybe it was the wording of that particular referendum, but I think we've got to go a long ways to change people's minds. It's going to take a grassroots effort. I worked hard in April on my then opponent, competitor, Mark Dion's bill that was, I thought, a fairly simple measure, a red flag bill to allow a court to determine if someone is so dangerous that they ought to forfeit their firearms at least for a period of time. And they would have a right to a hearing, of course, due process, and a right to restore the possession of firearms. And I rewrote the bill so it was pretty targeted. I thought it was pretty reasonable. Had Republican and Democratic support. It got a pretty unanimous report out of the committee. Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine supported it. I talked with them. The NRA stood down. So I thought it was good. Went through the House and the Senate, passed. The governor vetoed it. And then the Republicans in the House sustained the veto. It's really a hard to get anything done on gun issues, but it takes a lot of discussion. What we did when I was in the Judiciary Committee some years ago, and Steve Rowe was Attorney General, he brought people together. We put together a bill and worked it hard. Went to the Sportsmen's Alliance board meeting, said, what do you need from us to come on board with this particular bill? They said, we need this, that, and the other thing. Put that in the bill. We passed a bill, got enacted, that I think has saved thousands of lives. It's a bill, it's on the books, that allows a judge to take firearms away from someone facing a temporary protection from abuse order. The NRA stood down on that bill. The Sportsmen's Alliance supported it. That's how we get things done, one step at a time. Let's take the issues as they come. But it's a very divisive issue, as you know, when you talk about guns on any level. Yes, sir?
I'd like to piggyback on
Okay.
that a couple of ways.
Yes.
First of all, Massachusetts has a law that the local police chief is allowed to take the permit away from an individual if they got a protection order temporarily until they have a hearing and so forth. But I want to talk about how to change the debate on guns. You keep talking about school shootings.
Yeah.
Now, Sean wants to use a fire extinguisher.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting. But the problem is we're framing the debate wrong. The shootings at schools are a symptom of the problem, not the problem. You can harden the schools, then you're going to shoot the kids outside on the way to the bus. Shoot the kids on the bus. That's not solving the issue. I was a special operations person and had 1,000 rounds a week that I had to shoot. I wouldn't take on somebody with an automatic weapon, AR-15, that can shoot 1,000 rounds. Arming a teacher has another issue. Consider that you're a SWAT team. You get a call to a local school as an active shooter in the school. They're thinking in seconds. They open the door, they see a civilian with a gun. What are they going to do? They're going to shoot the teacher. I mean, we're just framing the issue wrong. You can't harden the schools and protect the kids. So we're sort of, you got to reframe that issue so the discussion is on how do we fix the real problem. I don't have to think civilians need AR-15s personally. But it's just
And I don't think we should be arming teachers. Mr. Crowe.
Janet, I mean, I think you'll find there are quite a few people in this room that are supporting you. And I have a question for you. Can you tell us how we can get you elected?
Oh, you plant. Yes, I got a lot of ideas. First, we got to get people out to vote. It's really that basic, getting people out to vote. You know, the polls I've read about show this as basically a dead heat between me and Sean Moody. Dead heat. Now, Alan Karen and Terry Hayes have every right to run, and God bless them. They're friends of mine, but it's between me and Sean Moody. No question about that. And we got to make sure people know that a vote for anybody else is a vote for Sean Moody. And secondly, there's no ranked choice voting in this election. None. I'm not running for Miss Congeniality. I'm running for governor. Vote. You got one vote in this thing, and it's either me or Sean Moody. I hope you'll tell your friends and neighbors to vote for me. Get out and vote. In a few weeks, just a few weeks, early voting starts, 30 days before the election. So early October. The woman in charge here says October 9th is when early voting starts. So get people out voting early and make sure they know this is an extremely important election. We say that every 2 years, but this really is an extremely important election. Canvassing is, people can canvass, people can call up 10 friends, and people can ask people to donate to my campaign. Look at, oh, Mr. Kennedy there has a donation envelope. Oh, look, he does too. Mr. Williams. Oh, where did they get those? So, I'm not running clean elections, I'm running traditionally, because honestly, a year ago, nobody knew whether clean elections money was even gonna be there. We still weren't sure a few weeks ago. So I chose to run traditionally. I'm raising money the old-fashioned way. I don't have a $500,000 check I can write to myself like Mr. Moody does. I don't have a plane of my own or a landing strip behind my house. I'm not rich. I'm raising money. And whatever you can give or ask friends to give, it's really easy to do online, janetmills.com/give. And you know, just phone calling, phone banking, canvassing, letters to the editor, you know, say what's on your mind, make it known. The forecaster, they take letters, right? Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.